Good evening, audience. Carl Armstrong back with you again with Carl's Conversations. Our panel is yet assembling, but when you have two, you have a panel. So Heather and I are going to get this show started, and then as our other guests come on, we'll add them to the show. Today's show, if you haven't already figured it out, we're talking about police violence, racial tension, and also the mass shootings that are going on in our country. God bless you, cousin Mickey. Glad to see you here, brother. And we do have a couple of more that will most likely join us. Like I said, we'll just assemble the panel as they come in. So we're dealing with the mass shootings in our nation, racial tensions, police violence. This really is part two from Friday evening. And for you all who are joining us now, and we'll be seeing this in the playback. If you haven't seen Friday night's edition, which was titled "And They're Still Killing Us, Where Do We Go From Now?" You probably need to watch that one. The show went a different direction when we had an impromptu call in by one of our local police officers who was a captain in the Stafford County Sheriff's Office. And so we do thank God for him because he did field questions in an impromptu way. So we're thanking God for him. So assembled with us today so far, we do have Heather Hutchison, Mickey Leon, who is my first cousin. And as soon as Pastor Gary Holland, there he is. There is Pastor Holland and the young son, Mr. Matthew. Matthew, don't hurt your dad, man. You know, he getting old. Don't let him live, Matthew. Let him live.
You don't have to worry about that.
Okay. And later on, I'm sure we'll be joined by Miss Alyssa when she gets the opportunity to join us. So listen, there was so much that happened on Friday evening that I just want to give us time, first of all, to come in and I want each of you to start with Heather. We're going to talk about what you're feeling about Friday night and how has that, dealt with you since then. We're going to go Heather and then Mickey and then Gary.
Yes, so that was a heavy conversation. And like you said, Carl, we didn't know when we started that we were going to wind up having conversation with a police officer. And we did. And he was gracious and answered some questions for us. And I think I've just been really in my head since then and, mulling and kind of ruminating. And this isn't about, the captain in particular who was on our call, but in general, with considering what's happening with the police in this country. I was telling you before, Carl, it just feels like it feels very similar to me, which was being in a relationship in a marriage that was narcissistic and abusive. And so, you're hearing a lot of things that sound really good and you really want to believe them. You really want to believe that those are the intentions and that's really, how the police in this country feel and how they intend to behave. But unfortunately, the actions that we keep seeing over and over and over are not lining up with the things that we're being told, which I think just adds to that distrust between the police and us as civilians. And I think it's just getting to a place where there's such a divide between us. And I just don't know what can be done to salvage that. It's going to have to be a big push. And I don't think that it's something that we can do on our own. I think it's going to have to be something that some of the police officers are going to have to step outside of what's comfortable and join the ranks of those of us who want to see change and kind of break rank with that, thin blue line and that brotherhood in order to make it a safer place, not just for us and our families, but, kind of like what the captain said on Friday, but for them as well. They live in our community as well. And they don't live in their police uniforms. He was a Black man, and we've seen it happen before that, police officers who are not in uniform have had issues with the police when they're not in uniform. So it was heavy. It was a good conversation. I'm glad we're continuing it. That's kind of what's been going on my mind a lot since then.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Mickey, what are your thoughts from Friday night?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Friday night, it was a good conversation. I agree with what Heather was saying in terms of like the police officers needing to really step up and like break ranks and whatnot. You know, I commend the Captain Lee for joining the conversation the way that he did. It was not an easy conversation to jump into, but it did shed some light for me on the thought process, you know, of other police departments, police officers that are, you know, have not been involved in these types of things. Some of the things that he said, you know, was good to hear in terms of how they have a program, you know, where people can call in and stuff like that if they got issues or they want to learn something. But some of the things that he said, there's not a knock against him, but I could also hear some of that rhetoric or indoctrination, kind of what we feel like is indoctrination, that seems to be prevalent among all police almost, you know. So I personally feel like police are going to have to be the ones that make the change. You know, as Heather said, they got to break ranks with that, and they're the ones that are going to have to bring the change. Before that conversation, I was feeling more like it's got to come from the outside. But after that conversation, I'm thinking about it, it really does have to come from inside. They have to identify that there's a problem, and they are going to have to be the ones to make the changes. So, you know, that's kind of my thoughts from Friday night.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Pastor Gary Holland, what are your thoughts from our session on Friday night?
Yeah, I thought it was a good session. It was interesting because I was in a really bad place, you know, just personally regarding all of the things that have been happening, that continue to happen, and I was just frustrated with all of the talking that I'd heard from people. You know, we're talking to each other, we're complaining, we're talking about the rhetoric, we're talking about the need for them to change. But as I was on that call, I started thinking, you know, we're not talking to them, and we're not talking to the ones that may be the ones to help us, you know, and help to get the message across to their leadership. Because I agree with Mickey, the change has to come from within, you know, that those organizations all around the country. That fundamental shift has to happen, and that acceptance has to happen within, you know, the police department, within law enforcement. Just like we have to accept some fundamental flaws that we have as, you know, minorities and of different, you know, communities and cultures, etc. I think we also all too often we just accept or ignore fundamental issues that we have and just hope that it goes away and that people stop talking about them. But until we start having those discussions, we'll never make progress. So I was encouraged that he and Captain Nate, Chief Nate, were willing to at least begin the discussion. And actually, he called me today, Captain Peters, and we're going to set up a series of sessions at the Stafford County Sheriff's Department this summer that are going to be focused on the community being able to talk directly to him and other leaders there. So we just had a conversation today, and I think it spawned from the discussion we had Friday. So I think it's a step in the right direction. And without communication, we can't make any progress. So let's keep it going.
Yeah, I thank you for that. And, you know, to answer your question, Pastor Gary, and to many others, you know, when you ask what are we doing besides talking to each other, look at what happened out of Friday night's conversation. Not only is Captain Lee Peters going to allow that for this summer, but, you know, him and Chief agreed that, listen, if I put something together, they will come on and speak to the public, you know, along with some officers from other agencies and allow the public to hear them also. So when you talk about, hey, how do we get from this environment right here to talking to people who are policymakers and lawmakers? Well, you already had a very positive effect from that. Somebody has to lead a conversation so that we can have other conversations, you know. And John Reed is right. Thank you, John Reed. It's important to have citizen advisory boards who can keep the police accountable. And I think it may have been Heather who said this on Friday evening, that you know, maybe it's going to take for civilians to take over some of this stuff. So Brother John Reed, you're right. I think it may have been you, Heather, who said something about that. You know, I had an interesting run-in yesterday. I was out and ended up at Fort Belvoir. Had an interesting conversation with a young lady, and she said some things, and we just were talking about the whole race issue and dealing with police, and she's so moved by what she's seeing that she's actually going to close up her business and she's going to dedicate herself to the study of Black history, not just in our nation, but around the world, and then educate others, because she believes that the miseducation of Black history all over the world is probably one of the root causes of what we see. But in talking, we talked about many things, and I'm gonna throw this on the table for you guys. You know, we have something in us that's called fight or flight, right? And if any of you have ever been in an abusive relationship, if any of you ever been, in a fight where you got jumped, situations where, you had to turn on fight or flight, and you've actually had to fight for your safety or fight for your life, that person that is born during that time never dies in you. And I don't think that sometimes people realize that many Black people in America, because of our negative contact with police officers, and I'm not saying this is every Black person, but many of us, every time we see those blue lights, we go into fight or flight mode. Because when that officer is approaching your vehicle, you don't know what type of officer you're getting. And I'm telling you, I've had very good situations, and I've had life and death situations with uniformed police officers. And I don't think people who have not experienced that, you don't understand that kind of trauma that's being delivered to you over and over and over again. And we already know that in the legal system, once you get to the criminal justice system, if you have an issue with a law enforcement officer, well, they work with the prosecutors, they work with the DAs, they know the judges, they're in and out of these courtrooms all the time. Even though the scales of justice are supposed to be balanced, it's not balanced when you walk into the courtroom against a law enforcement official. And so many of us are dealing with that fight or flight. You may have to fight for your life. I remember telling a Virginia State trooper years ago, this has been over 20 years ago, matter of fact, almost 30 years ago, because he kept kicking the inside of my ankles, telling me to spread my legs. And I finally turned around and told him, if you kick me again, I'm going to hurt you. And I'm ready to die today. I'm ready to die today. When you have that type of experience, you're changed. And I think sometimes that people don't really realize what we're going through. And Pastor Gary, I'm going to start with you to talk about that portion of it. Having this trauma over and over again, and you just don't know what you're getting when you deal with a police officer. Go ahead, sir.
That's very true, and you don't have to have had the personal experience to have that trauma. The fact that we're inundated with story after story over the years, whether it's mass shootings and children being killed, or people at grocery stores being killed, whether it's the use of deadly force consistently, and unfairly against people of color by law enforcement. The more we see this and we read it and we experience it over and over from afar, you don't have to have actually been in it yourself to be traumatized by it. And we all agree that when they walk up to your car, that trauma kicks in. And I have a relative, a very close relative, that was pulled over. And after the encounter, they called me upset. This young lady was crying. And it was in Stafford. And the way she described the situation, it infuriated me. And thankfully, there are police officers like Peters that are engaged in the community. I was able to call one that's a leader and personally and say, hey, can you check into this? And he looked at the camera. He looked at the tape from the car. And he told me exactly what happened, and he had no reason to lie. And it wasn't the way she described it. But I attribute that to the trauma that we have and how we may see things and hear things differently. We may respond more aggressively, with more fear because we're just so, hurt because of what we see. So that fight or flight is very real. And just because a person may not have encountered police themselves and then had to deal with the situation where they were treated unfairly by law enforcement, no, they're still traumatized by it, no doubt. You can't tell me there's a person of color that's not affected. People across this nation are traumatized lately because of all of the things going on with gun violence and law enforcement, etc. Whether you've been on the receiving end of that abuse or not, doesn't minimize the effect that it's had on us. And I think that people need to understand that. Law enforcement needs to understand that. They can't just say get over it, or you live in a community where these issues don't exist. Doesn't matter. It's still really adversely affecting, the psyches of a lot of people. And I think the more we talk and articulate that, to law enforcement leadership and local elected officials, at some point, hopefully they'll get it, and there'll be a fundamental shift in how they, deal with holding them accountable and how they deal with policing, in the different minority communities around the country.
Thank you for that, sir. Vicky, what do you think about that? You're still muted, sir. There we go.
My bad. Repeat the question for me so I make sure I answer correctly, please.
So we're talking about, the fight or flight mode that sometimes,
Right.
That we get into, and when you have a cop approaching you, sometimes, with the issues that we've been through, sometimes you're going through that.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, given the times that we're in, like you said, we don't know what cop we're getting, and it's not limited to just white cops. So we gotta, I want to make sure that we're clear on that. It is not limited to just white cops. Any race, as we saw with Philando Castile, black officers, men, women, all of it. So, it is traumatizing when you see those lights behind you, even now. I mean, especially now, even before all of the video and whatnot, like as a young black man, it is scary. My father had the conversation with me about police officers and what to do when we're stopped. Like before, I think I just got my license. You know what I mean? And just all of the things that you go through, what it's sad to say, what you feel like when you get stopped is you are about to be put into a situation. You could potentially be put into a situation where you might die. You feel like the officer already has a prejudice, a bias against you, especially if it's a situation where you didn't do anything. You weren't speeding. Your tail light is not out. You didn't run that stop sign. You know it. So you're like, why is this person stopping me? What are they looking for? What quota are they trying to meet? Am I about to be a headline? I know the most recent time when I was stopped, I knew I didn't do anything. I knew I didn't run the stop sign that the officer told me. So, he came to the window, I already had my stuff out, but I had my hands on the steering wheel, and I told him my wallet is on my lap and my phone is recording. Let him know all of that, so that I didn't want no problem. But but I wasn't about to reach in my pocket and get my wallet in front of him and then mess around and get shot. So yeah, it's definitely a fight or flight situation that turns on in your head. I mean, and unfortunately that can cause some issues too, because for some people, fight comes first, and you can't really, like, if you try to flee from the police, that's a situation. So you feel trapped, you feel boxed in. So
Yeah, thank you for that. Heather, what do you think about the fight or flight?
It's huge. One of the things that I think would be a simple, it's not going to be a fix, but a place to start that I don't understand why this hasn't happened yet is kind of like what Daniel just said in his comment. When we were talking the other night to Captain Lee, and he said, they work really hard to de-escalate. Well, when you're getting pulled over initially, that already has escalated the situation in your mind. I'm a white woman and it already scares me. I got a speeding ticket a few months ago, and I wasn't feared for my life, obviously. And that the police officer actually was a black man, and we ended up having a good conversation at the end. But I was aware that everything I did, that he was wary of me, which made me anxious and made me scared. And I'm not even black. Like, I don't have all the rest of the trauma to try to stack on top of that. But what I don't understand is, they keep saying our job is to protect and serve. And so if your job is to protect and serve, and you're pulling me over supposedly for a busted tail light or a broken brake light or whatever, then if I'm part of your community and you want to keep me and everybody else safe, then immediately do what you can when you come to the window to put me at ease. And I feel like that's not the protocol. The protocol is, it's pretty aggressive when they show up at your window. Usually it's a command first, even if it's just license or registration. I feel like, and it sounds silly, but it puts people at ease and gives them a moment to breathe, for the officer to say, hey, I just want to let you know everything's okay. I wanted to pull you over and let you know blah, blah, blah is happening. And that doesn't usually happen. So there's already this anxiety that's happening in the person who's being pulled over. And like, Mickey was saying, you don't know what that person's dealing with and what their response is going to be to a police officer anyway. And little things can set that person off. And it kind of feels like sometimes that the officer should be acting more adult than the person in the car. Their job should be to keep everything in control, to keep everyone calm, to make sure that he or she does his job and that everyone goes home alive. And it doesn't seem like that's protocol often. My boyfriend is not a white man and has been pulled over a million times for bogus reasons. And the last time we were pulled over when I was with him, I've seen it several times with my own eyes. The officer comes up and says, "You know why I pulled you over?" And he'll say, "No, sir, I don't know," because we don't know. And the officer will say, "Really? You have no idea? You want to take a guess at why I pulled you?" Like, it's so patronizing and condescending. And you cross the wrong person and they're going to come back at you with an attitude, which may or may not be warranted. But the person in control, the police officer, then can potentially escalate it. And I feel like if they would just start from the beginning by treating the people in the vehicles as human beings and say, "Listen, I'm not trying to scare you. Just want to let you know you've got a brake light out and, you need to deal with that. I'm going to give you a warning," even whatever. Start building some of that trust. I don't understand. It seems like a really simple first place to start for me because it's traumatic getting pulled over at this point.
You got that right. Let me tell you something. I also want to be fair. I want to be fair because I don't want to dehumanize police officers, right? And there's Joshua King, who is a law enforcement officer. He says officer safety versus commuter safety. There has to be a better way to balance it. Thank God for you, Joshua King. You're awesome, and your presence is appreciated. We know that you're a law enforcement officer, so please, any of your comments are welcome here. And if you want to jump on, I'll send you the link. But let me say this. I want to make sure that we don't dehumanize police officers. Let me make sure that I'm very clear about this. I don't think any of us here believe that all law enforcement officers are bad. I think we would agree that the vast majority of them are good people. The problem is the bad apples, they don't have to even be rotten to the core to cause your life, right? And you can even have a good officer with a good heart, but their mistakes in dealing with us can cost us our life or our freedom. And that's a scary thing. So there has to be accountability with the police officers, and there's got to be some accountability with us. You look at what just happened. I think it was down in, I believe it was in Arlington, Texas. Police officer approached the car. I believe there was good exchange for a few minutes. And from what has been described, the person in the car pulled a gun and shot the cop. So I do realize that their job is full of danger. And remember that they deal with the worst 10% of the population way more than we do. I try to be very mindful of that. And that's why I try to make sure no matter how I'm feeling, I'm respectful and all that. The problem is there's been so many instances where people have been pulled over and have done just what I described: courteous, respectful, honorable, listen to commands, and you still find yourself face down in the street, gun in your face, being called out of your name, and when they're trying to provoke you so that you will do something, so they have an excuse to blow your brains out. So I'm so frustrated with the whole deal, but I think, people keep saying this, and I don't want this to sound like a hashtag. I think the training is a big part of the issue. If we listen to what Captain Peter said the other night, I was listening to him, and he sounds like a professional police officer. So what he was telling us was not something that he made up, right? It's part of their training. It's part of their policies. So what do we do not to bring a bull to a china shop? And when you get the police involved, you just don't know what you're getting. And so we're going to start with Elisa here. She's just coming on. Welcome, Elisa. I want to know, first of all, how you feel about Friday night's session. And also right before you came on, we were talking about fight or flight. So many of us Black Americans have that fight or flight. So when the police stop us, maybe we are a little aggressive. Maybe we are a little on edge. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, but I'm saying there's a reason for it. Go ahead, sister.
Hey everyone. Sorry I'm late coming in. But I don't think that it's our responsibility to be anything other than citizens. Police officers are trained to deal with all kind of situations, or supposedly trained. So if you have a 20-year-old who is in the city in Minneapolis or close to Minneapolis and watch George Floyd get killed when he was handcuffed and he's a little jittery, yeah, that's not our position as citizens. As Black people, we are already leery of the police because we know that before all of this camera work and before cell phones and everything, anything could happen. You know, you could be beaten, false report, falsely arrested, drugs planted on you, guns planted on you. So I don't think that it's the responsibility of the citizen. Yes, we should comply. We should do as if you're stopped by the police, then you do give your license and your registration. But the problem comes in when it's over aggressive. You give your license, you give your registration, you're told to reach in your glove compartment, as was Philando Castile, and he did, and he told the officer that he had a gun, but he told him to give him his registration, and he did. And then he's dead. So I don't think that the responsibility falls on the citizen. And that's just my personal opinion. You can have someone who's going through a mental crisis, who we've seen over and over again, who's having something go on and they're killed. Someone could be going through a drug crisis where they're overdosing or maybe a little bit more aggressive and they're killed. The responsibility does not fall on a citizen to act in any way when a police officer is called. Yes, if you just being pulled over for a routine traffic stop, you give your license, your registration, you get your ticket, and you move on. It's when it's escalated that it turns to something else.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Joshua King, who is a law enforcement officer, he just said something here that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Mr. King. He said training versus police culture. We have to focus on the culture. And I'm going to leave this open for whoever wants to reply to this. Well, what do we say to that?
So I feel like, I mean, he's right. As we said on the live on Friday, like, that's why I say it's got to come from within, because it's the culture. You can hear it. And again, not to pick on, I think it was Captain Lee or who got on, not to pick on him, but he did get on. So you can hear it even in his conversation. You could hear that, like, it's like it's the culture, or however they trained or whatever, right? It's the culture. And how do you get out of that? It was at one point during the conversation where it did take on a very much us versus them type of tone, from him, from the perspective of the other officers. And for me, again, not to pick on him, I'm just saying as officers as a whole, but I've always felt like that is kind of the way they felt, like they're supposed to get beat up or whatever before they respond. The citizens feel like they can't defend themselves. But for me, I'm like, it's that culture, right? Everybody, I guess, has a right to defend themselves, but you as a law enforcement officer, you do kind of have to take a little bit more of a beating, so to speak, for lack of a better term, than what the average citizen is, because you hold that person's life in your hands. Like, as much as you may want to put it on the citizen, as much as people want to put it on, oh, if you had to just comply, no. You as the officer, you do hold that person's life in your hands, especially if it's not a situation where they're coming at you with a gun, or they're coming at you with a weapon. When it's a situation where this person was stopped and it's an arrest and they're resisting arrest, okay, you got to get on the ground and wrestle. You got to get on the ground and wrestle. At what point do you need to shoot a person when they don't have a gun? Because as I said in that conversation the other night, if I'm in a street fight and this person is hitting me and I shoot them, I'm going to jail. I can say self-defense all I want. I'm going to jail. It's not that way for a police officer. Like, they don't have to justify any of that. I know they say they do and whatnot, but what we've seen, they do not have to justify any of that. All they got to do is say we fear for our life, and they can blow your head off, and there's nothing that anybody in the world can do about it. So when you have that kind of power, like, you have to treat that a little bit better. I mean, it's cliche, but like they said in the movies, with great power comes great responsibility. And right now, it just feels like they're not handling that responsibility well. They feel like it comes off like an organized gang, is what it comes off as. Like, I got this, I can do that. You gonna listen to what I say, and instead of getting respect the way that you're supposed to get it, they come out and try to demand it. And that's not the way respect works. I'm already uncomfortable with you. That. Like, as I said, try to diffuse the situation from the beginning. Don't come to me all riled up. Why are you riled up? You got the gun. You're in charge. You have the gun. Act like you deserve to be in charge. But
There it is. Thank you, Mickey. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Well,
one thing I wanted to kind of to add on to that is I'm not sure who said it, but one thing that really frustrates me that I don't know if that the police officers really understand that we people of color especially deal with is why is the burden it was Alyssa, why is the burden always on us? Why do I have to have that burden of telling my 13-year-old son who was in the car listening and just got out of the car when we made it home? I have to explain to him, what to do, what not to do, what the risks are, etc. The burden is on us as citizens, and the burden shouldn't be on us to make sure that situations are de-escalated. As Mickey said, they have the gun. They're in the position of authority. They're in the position when we have these encounters with them, but they release that burden to certain people. And it's not always released equally, but it's released to us. And it is unfair. And I think that too often law enforcement doesn't want to acknowledge that their expectations of certain people is completely unrealistic, especially when there's excitement and maybe I am drinking and driving and I'm afraid, and when they pull me over I'm nervous and I'm jerky and I'm acting a certain way. Instead of them trying to de-escalate and find out what's going on, it can turn deadly. And the fact that the burden is on us to be the ones to de-escalate a situation, whether it's through compliance or what have you, when they're the ones in authority and they're the ones with the training, supposedly, it's completely, it blows my mind. And also, Regina said something that I was thinking as well. One of the issues I think we have within the police, and I think there's 16,000 police departments around the country. So this is, it covers our entire country, every town and hamlet and whatever. I don't think that there's enough in terms of screening potential officers, psychological screening, emotional, etc., whether they were in the military or not. There's not enough screening of some of law enforcement officers, because there are people that are wearing a badge that absolutely should not be wearing a badge. I think it may be tougher to become a teacher than to become a police officer. And then that also blows my mind. There should be a lot more strenuous effort put into making sure that people are qualified and safe to be carrying that badge and arresting people.
In many states, you have to spend more hours to be a hairdresser or a barber and training to get your license than you do in the police academy. That's scary. When it comes to police culture, were there any other comments from the panel?
Well, I call because we've had conversations privately. I feel like the culture of the police department needs to be abolished. They need to change the hiring practices. When you go for a federal job, a federal contract job, or even on a state level, your background is thoroughly checked. If you're tied to any type of organizations that may have bias or illegal ties or anything of that nature, that should be on the forefront, because what we're really dealing with is the culture of racism. Right? So when we are hiring police officers, we need to make sure that there is no ties to any of these type of organizations, that you do not hold these type of beliefs, because until we deal with the culture, and the culture of the police department is racism. That's it. There's no other thing. So if we deal with the hiring practices of hiring and background check, because you cannot train racism away. You can't vote racism away. You cannot, you have to stop it and meet it where it is. And if it comes to your front door, deny it, right? Let it go. Because you can't have a real society. This is why we're still in this predicament if we don't deal with the root of what we're dealing with as African Americans. We may be fighting police brutality, but that's the symptom. The root is racism.
Yeah, we fighting more than the police. I'll tell you that.
Right. And every underline, we fighting a lot of symptoms, but all the underline to it all is racism.
That's right. Heather, I don't want to move on until we give you an opportunity. You good?
Yeah, I'm good. I have more to say later. Let Mickey talk. He has something to say.
All right. You got something, Mickey?
I just wanted to add to what Alyssa said. Yeah, I just wanted to add to what Alyssa said about, you know, fighting racism and everything like that. The other part of it is that it's political now, right? So the, you know, far right, not even so far right, but, you know, Republicans, and especially under Donald Trump, and while Obama was in office, they took this opportunity to associate anybody, people wanting, you know, for police to change. They've associated that now with being anti-police, you know, and being, you know, a leftist and, you know, being a liberal, whatever they want to call Democrats and stuff like that. So they have now, instead of being on the side of just human beings in general and not wanting human beings to have their lives taken and, you know, that type of thing, now they have also added on, now if you want any change in the police, you are anti-police or you're anti-American, like that, which then takes, you may have had some of those other people who may be Republicans, but maybe they were on, you know, in the middle in terms of needing the police to change, but they hold their political views so dear that they can't side with wanting change. You know, these are people who will vote against their own interests just because they want to vote Republican. So, you know, you add that component in there, it becomes even harder because now you might have a politician that wants to make a change, but it will be not in his best political interest to do so. So all of that stuff gets wrapped up in it. And in a post-Trump era, it ain't really post-Trump because he's still alive and well, but the damage that he did and what he allowed to come out, like the people that he allowed to get a spotlight and the things that they say, all of that plays into the issues that we're having now with not being able to have a real conversation without change. You can't even have a conversation about police change without some politician throwing their hat in the ring and talking about how now you're anti-police. I'm anti-dying, not anti-police. I'm anti-getting shot in the street because I was going 70 and a 65. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
But you can't even, all of it is political now too. And that's a problem.
Give me a ticket, not a bullet. Listen, I'm going to say something to y'all. And this is what is kind of gnawing at me. Now, there are many of us that January 6th didn't surprise us, right? The only thing that was surprising about January 6th is that it didn't happen before. And I'm one of those people. I'm wondering what took it so long because this had been boiling over. But I have been saying, when we start dealing with the amount of police officers in the U.S. that belong to extremist groups, that when you start dealing with that issue, you're going to start dealing with solving the problem. After January 6th, I really am wondering how many police departments, law enforcement agencies, however you want to call it, how many of them have started going through the backgrounds of their officers, especially the ones who have a high complaint ratio. How many have gone through and discovered that they're part of these extremist groups, participate in some of this extremist stuff, and has there been discipline? Has there been termination? Because you cannot expect to put a person like that on the street and protect and serve with dignity, honor, and respect to each citizen differently. It just doesn't work. Whether that's the state level, the federal level, or the local level. But now on this thing, we're going to talk about police violence, racial tension, and the police shootings. But what I'm saying goes into everything, because now there's a climate in our country, and I can't blame Donald Trump for it, because the climate has been there. The culture has been there. What he did was he just made it all right to come out of the closet and put it on TV. You have elected officials at all levels who don't have a problem now stating where they are with these anti-racial unity positions. When you start dealing with that component, and then the fact that the Second Amendment proponents, I appreciate all the amendments. I don't see a problem with American citizens being able to own weapons, but I do question why we need an arsenal. I do question why we need military-grade automatic weapons. And every time we see a shooting, today, Kenosha, Wisconsin, another shooting, right? Today, Austin, Texas. Today, San Antonio. These are shootings. What are we going to do? That's open to the panel. What are we going to do?
I mean, it's you got to have your guns until black folks have them. You know, I mean, the NRA, they don't step up and say anything when, when it's us, when we have it and our rights are at risk. But what can you do? You can't do anything without like disassociating that conversation with politics, and people don't understand the Constitution. So these people use fear. Oh, they're going to take your guns. Nobody's trying to take anybody's guns. Like, there isn't a state in the union, Democrat or Republican, that wants to take guns. Virginia could be blue, purple, sea blue, deep, whatever you want to say. Virginia is the capital of the Confederacy. It doesn't matter who is in office. Do you really believe that Virginia would ever allow guns to be gone? That's not going to happen. So why do you have an issue with gun control? Like you said, you don't need an arsenal. You really need an assault rifle. For what? Like, what are you going to do with it? But we can't, like, until you disassociate the conversation with all of the politics, you can't do anything. And it's my opinion. Everything is wrapped up in there together. It's, oh, they're trying to make some change. Let's go say they're all being liberal. This is cancel culture. Let's cancel it. Let's say they're trying to cancel us, and now we can end the conversation. Meanwhile, they're making all the moves in the background to make it harder to make any of those changes. It's like it's smoke and mirrors. They're distracting you over here while they're doing everything they need to do over here. And as citizens, we don't even know what to do. We can't even begin to talk about what to do, because every time we try to talk about what to do, they start distracting you. So,
we're gonna make a move. Gary, you had something, right?
Oh, no, yeah, I was just, I think I posted something a couple of days ago. I do believe that all of us that care are armed and dangerous. And I think the weapons we have really are our voices, our votes, and our dollars. We have to change. A lot of this stuff is controlled by elected officials, right? They fund and control the budgets and the policies of the law enforcement departments. But I think we focus so much on the latest headlines, we forget that we need to get focused in our communities. We need to make sure that people are voting for sheriffs when they're elected, voting for boards of supervisors, voting for these entities that can set and influence policy that make sure that body cameras are in place, that make sure that more strenuous screening processes are in place for the police. But we don't want to vote. We don't want to vote. We want to talk, but we don't want to slow down, educate ourselves, pull our neighbors in with us and our family and our friends, and get out here and vote and remove people from places where they have the ability to make change, and maybe they just don't care, or maybe they don't mind, and they just let things go. But we become so comfortable in talking to each other and fussing we take our eye off the target, and the target is elected officials. We have to vote, and it's not about the president. It's about voting locally and making sure we know why we're voting for people and that we hold them accountable when they're elected. I mean, really, I think that's the only way we can really affect true change fundamentally. We have to change the people that are in place. And if the right people aren't there, some of us need to run, right? And really make the difference that we're always talking about, and the difference that we're not seeing, And I think I'm just tired of talking heads, and I'm tired of people not really dealing with the problem at a point where we can actually affect change. And that's by putting the right people in place that really want to do what their communities want to see done when it comes to policies and holding law enforcement accountable, school, the makeup of schools and teachers and all of that stuff. We have to exercise the weapons we have, and it's our vote, it's our voice, and it's our dollars too. Economic boycotts make a big difference. I think you said it Friday. The Montgomery bus boycott, it caught a lot of attention. It was almost a year long, and most of the bus riders were African Americans. They stopped riding those buses. The state felt it. People felt that financial impact, and that caught a lot of attention. We talk all the time about boycott this, boycott that, and it lasts for a week. And then we're right back at Walmart or buying Jordans or whatever it is, right? So I'm just tired of folks talking, but not really wanting to roll up their sleeves and really hold fast to making a change. And I look forward to the day that we all, myself included, make that decision and stand together and really, really try to make change happen. Sorry.
No, thank you for that. Appreciate it. Alyssa, Heather, y'all got something to add on that one? All right.
Well, I thought Heather had something to say.
My brain's just spinning. So, Carl, when you were talking about going back through with the officers that are already, on staff and all across this country, I was thinking through how I could say this and be able to share the story with minor, not tons of details, so I'm not exposing anyone. But after what happened on January 6th, it was found out, like you said, Carl, there was a lot of people who were exposed as being either part of the military or part of police departments across the country. And so my parents live in Charlottesville and have a very close friend. It's not a Charlottesville police chief, but who was a sheriff from somewhere else in this country that they're close friends with. And he had called, and after some stuff had happened in the public, he was able to fire 2 of the police officers. And I didn't know this before, and I'm being very vague on purpose, but he had contacted my dad numerous times for counsel because he had struggled with these 2 particular men in question. And so he was actually relieved and glad that this had happened because it gave him real reason to be able to let them go. And so, that was part of the conversation I had with my dad. And part of the thing I'm thinking about today is there are things that, all of us here agree are completely egregious that, if we would look, was things that, they've participated in, or that they maybe have tweeted, or that they've done to someone in their neighborhood, or even complaints that have been brought against them as police officers, that if you try to hold them accountable or say you're no longer fit to serve, I already can hear it in my head of them saying, I have a right to think and say whatever I want and do whatever I want, and don't recognize how damaging and violent that kind of mindset can be to an entire community of people. So how do you even regulate at a personnel level with things that a lot of us, I would like to say the majority of us, would think is wrong, when there's a huge group of people who would come back and say, that's, now you're going against my political, belief system, or, you took that the wrong way. But you and I know that this is hate and this is racism that's going to be acted out in their job. How do you deal with that? I don't know. So that's kind of where my brain was when we were talking about that piece.
I appreciate that. You have something, Elisa, excuse me.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what Gary was saying about voting and what Regina comment was, because I agree. I am a voter. I vote in all elections. I'm not against voting, but what I am saying is that you can vote someone in like we did with Joe Biden. The country of Black America came up and came out and showed out, right? But now we're still with the same policies. So we need to start challenging policies that are in place. We can't put a person in and then handcuff them, right? Because they still have to go according to policies that were there. And changing policies is what we really need to be focusing on, because if you change the policy, then it wouldn't not so much not matter, but then we have a better chance at seeing tangible changes in our communities.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, all this stuff is connected. And I appreciate what Joshua King just said. He's so right. He said we elect lawmakers, lawmakers elect judges. It's all connected. We have to put people in office who will fight for us. And I want to take a minute just to address the sentiment from Sister Regina. You got a lot going on there, sister. I want to say that she said Georgia voted, Virginia voted, the world voted. These elected officials are selling dreams and taking pictures. Some are, sister. Some are, but some are out here really fighting, right? I could name a few. I don't know if I should. I will. I look at people like Joshua Cole. Joshua Cole has served his district well. Common sense, common courtesy bills that he has sponsored, and he's been accountable. Anytime something is going on in Stafford, if they're not incessant in Richmond, Joshua Cole is there. I wonder how the brothers sleep. And I could name a lot of other people. Tanisha Allen at the local level, involved, cares, she's reachable. These people have served well. So yes, you do have some folks who are selling lies and taking pictures. But I thank God for Pastor Gary Holland and Enough and Stafford Black with Miss Algiers Diamond. I think it was them two that came up with the motto, we'll either change your mind or change your seat. That's called accountability. We'll change your mind or change your seat. And that is the power of the vote. The power of the vote is more powerful than you think. Daniel Bowman wants to know, when is the Stafford sheriff election? Does anybody know that?
Yeah, I don't know offhand, but I know it's coming up, and that actually raises a point and something that I've been thinking about lately: education of our communities about things like that. Why is it so hard for people to understand when is the next Stafford sheriff's election? When are the deadlines for the gubernatorial elections that are coming up? What are the deadlines and when are the dates for what's going on with our delegate races? Education and making it easy for people to be able to quickly understand things like that. What seats are available in which districts, within Stafford, what's going to be available this year versus next year, because they stagger them, right? But not understanding that or knowing that can prevent someone that's interested from preparing to run for one of these seats. So education is key. And one of the things that I'd love for us to be able to do is find somebody with a couple of dollars to fund a portal or something online that has all of that information easily available, so we can all direct people to it across the state of Virginia. And I know we have the Virginia government sites. Those things are hard to read. And I'm not, the slowest guy in the room, but it's hard to kind of track through the dates and all the legalese and all of that data. Why is it so complicated? It's complicated for a reason, to keep people from knowing what the details are, to keep people from realizing they can vote. But somebody needs to kind of simplify that and make that data available and keep it up to date for people, so people like Daniel can quickly say, you know what, Decatur's up for election in 2023. I'm going to find out who's going to run against him, and I'm going to start supporting them or start checking them out. You know what I mean?
Right.
But education is key, and we struggle in that area, I believe.
Well, let me tell you, to answer your question, Pastor Holland, Joshua King, whom I interviewed, he wrote a book on just what you were saying. I have a few of those books. And for the first 3 people who will contact me with their address, I will mail the book to you at my cost. He was talking about exactly what we're talking about. such good information. If y'all get a chance, I interviewed him on Carl's Conversations. You can hit Carl's Conversations on YouTube or Facebook and go look for that interview. His name is Joshua King, and he answered all of those questions. There's so much information that's very useful, very easy to get to. But the first 3 people that hit me up with their name and address, I will send you a copy of that book at no charge to you. All right. And Regina said the Stafford votes April 24th. Amen. All right. John Reed said, he says, we have a primer and the Prince William perspective who is running in each race. I can see. Yes, John, please send the link to the comment thread for this particular live show. We would appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. And Maya says Decatur is up for election in 2023. All right, there it is. And of course, you guys know early voting starts in Stafford very soon. I think on the 24th, as Regina has stated. So for all of you who are registered voters, we can start early voting on Stafford on the 24th. Go to the Stafford County website, and so you can get all the voter information. I'll begin to post some of the information on the Carl's Conversations webpage so that you guys can see that. And for all of you who are not registered, you need to register to vote. And in Virginia, it is easier because once you do anything with the DMV, we're going to do automatic voter registration unless you mark not to do it. Okay, there you go. Before we get out of here, I do want to talk about the recent slew of shootings in this nation. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where to begin specifically. But just today, you know, I was looking at the news before I got on Kenosha, Wisconsin, the same place where that brother Kyle Rittenhouse, the teenage boy with the long gun. There was a shooting there today. San Antonio, Texas, you got a shooting. Arlington, Texas, you got a shooting. And I'm sure there's more I don't know about the recent shooting in Indianapolis. 19-year-old kid who's just last year, his mother called the police because she knew he was off. They had him evaluated, but, you know, hamstrung by the loss. They knew he was a problem. Killed 8 people, then killed himself. What do we think about this recent rash of shootings in this nation? What are we thinking?
You know, we talk about culture. I'm sorry, just jumping in. We talk about the law enforcement culture that needs to be addressed and changed, and I agree with that. There's a culture about guns in this country that is really embarrassing internationally. You know, I have the good fortune of working for a company that's global, and I talk to people from all over the world all the time, and they cannot understand why things haven't fundamentally been addressed regarding guns in our country, whether it's assault rifles or the ease of having guns, or people, as you mentioned, that have been flagged as problematic, being prevented from having guns or access to guns, holding people accountable when their children use the guns and the commission of a crime. I mean, why hasn't more been done? It's because there's a culture in this country about guns, about firearms, that's is quite, in my opinion, it's ridiculous, and there absolutely need to be changes. Will that prevent criminals from having guns? No, it won't. No, it won't. But there are a lot of countries around this world that are prosperous like ours that have more stringent gun control laws, and they don't have a fraction of the killings and the mass shootings that we have here in America. So you can't tell me that taking a fresh look at our laws and our policies around guns and making sensible changes can reduce what we've been seeing. You can't tell me that. And for whatever reason, we have this culture that, hey, don't even talk to me about it. Leave it alone. It's my gun, and you stay where you are and don't worry about it. And it amazes me, and it's actually shameful that the country hasn't come together. The politicians and the people haven't arisen together with a loud enough voice to demand, a look at this, right? People talk about it, but then a couple of million people raise their voices enough. Some politicians will make some moves to see what we can do to make a change regarding guns in this country, because it's scary and it's embarrassing internationally. It really is.
Thank you, Gary.
Gun violence in this country is as American as apple pie, if you to use the phrase. The country glorifies guns, as we know, and at this point, it's perpetuated with what's going on in the news. So these people, like that boy was 19 years old. There's no doubt in my mind that he got the idea to shoot up the FedEx plant or wherever he worked at FedEx. He got that from what he saw on TV. He's seen other people do it. He's seen the news coverage that comes with it. He's seen how it's glorified. He went out as a martyr for a lot of people. So at this point, it's just perpetuated over and over and over again. These people are seeing that. And then you have these people who want, you know, like I said, they're afraid their guns will be taken away. So they're teaching their kids, you know, get your guns, have your guns. You know, this is what you need to do as an American. It's your right as an American. So the country does need to address it. But the only thing that America respects, the only thing, period, is money. That is the only way you will get any real change real fast in this country, is to affect money. So until we come together as a country and decide, or different groups, and decide what we're going to do to impact money and these politicians in their seats, which again tie back to money, nothing's going to happen. The NRA is, I don't know, the stats probably wrong, but I know the NRA is one of the most powerful organizations in the country. And Republicans are scared to death of them. They will not run afoul of the NRA. So until we do something that can have a big economic impact on something that these people care about, like they care about the NRA, nothing's going to happen. Like, what can we do? It's money. We can march in the street all day long. We can sing "We Shall Overcome" all day long. We can get up here, we can have these conversations, and we can talk about how bad it is all day long. But if you are not affecting somebody's pockets, people that matter, nothing that you say, it doesn't matter. Like, they love being able to placate us with other things. Like, you know, oh, let's set up a memorial for this. Let's add more Black people to this. Let's do all of that without ever treating the problem. They don't have to do it because there's no economic impact. It's not coming out of somebody else's pocket. So we, as a group, whatever groups are against these things, we have to come up with a way that's gonna cause financial strain for the people who make the decisions. Until we do that, nothing's gonna happen, because the only thing that America respects, and the only thing powerful white men who run this country respect, is money. That is it.
You have a point, brother. You have a point. Heather, Alisa, y'all have any input on the recent rash of shootings?
So I everything that's all been said by Mickey and Gary so far. But I think we, as America, have a deeper issue as well. That's not just the racism piece. And that's, we just are deeply indoctrinated to believe in our individuality. You know, it's easy to not be affected when you're a white person, when Black people are being killed, if you have no connection to any Black people, if they're not part of your community. It's easy to not be concerned about people dying with gun violence if you're never experienced it or don't know anybody who has. You know, it's easy to say that, you know, COVID isn't real when your small little circle hasn't been touched by it. And as Americans, we're really fast to live as individuals instead of living not just in community, but to believe that other people are just as worthy as we are, and to make concessions at times when necessary to allow all of us to be able to live in peace and you know, to live our best lives. But I also think that we started this country with an attitude problem, and we never have stopped. And we love to believe that we're the best. And so we left and created colonies because we wanted to do things differently, and we thought that we could do it better. And so we came here, and then we fought for our freedom, you know, against England so that we could do it our way. And that's been the theme since America has started. And we have, you know, forced that on other countries, and we have forced that on, you know, even individual groups inside of the country who have, you know, grouped together as religious groups. And I don't mean as terrorist religious groups. I mean, just in their communities. And we've decided, no, this is the way we're going to do it because we're the best. And, you know, I feel like we're just going to go down in this huge puff of smoke screaming we're the best when we haven't been the best at much of anything for a very, very, very long time. You know, it's like Gary said, it's embarrassing to the rest of the world, but we're determined that you can't take our guns, and, you know, that I have the right to say what I want to say. And the extreme conservatives have done a really good job of riling up a large demographic of people who are afraid that you are going to censor what they say and what they do, how they act, and you're going to take their guns. And those things right there feed right into the issue of racism. And so you've got a group of white people who are terrified for no valid reason. And in that terror is breeding violence. And so this is just, it's a perfect storm for all this junk to continue to happen and escalate, unfortunately.
Yeah, Mr. Professional over here muted. Wow, Heather, that was a mouthful. Thank you. And Gary, you leaned in on that one. You haven't leaned in all this whole hour. You leaned in on that one, brother.
No, I'm leaning on the rail on the deck.
Okay. Lisa, I know you're not gonna let this one go by. I just know it.
You know, it just always boggles my mind when we see all of these mass shootings and all of this gun violence. Nobody cares about the victim. It's like, just don't take our guns. It doesn't matter how many people get shot. When you speak about how many Black men are killed by the police, you're met with, oh, there's more white people killed by the police. And I always think, so is that okay with you? Like, are you okay with people dying just as long as you and your selfishness have what you want? And I think that Heather is 310% correct, because it seems almost to a selfish nature that as long as I have my guns, it doesn't matter what mass shooting or what happened, because what is the solution? If we're seeing all of these mass shootings, all of this gun violence and all of this, and everyone else is not okay with it, but it seems the conservative and the right wing and every racist in the world is okay with people that look like them getting killed, it goes to a sense of narcissism, because this country was founded on violence. I mean, you laugh, you from England came here, you fought the English to get your rights, killed the Indians. So I guess it is the Native Americans. I guess it is instilled. It just boggles me. I always wonder, don't you care about the victims at all? Because we don't hear about the victims. We just hear a mass shooting and then we go straight into gun, don't take my guns. I mean, and these people look like the people that are saying, don't take my guns, for the most part. So it just always boggles me with that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I appreciate that. Let me say something, and I would imagine this is going to be a bit controversial, especially coming from a man of the cloth. I'm so tired of punk politicians until I'm ready to vomit. When we look at what happened, not only on January 6th, but what led up to it. Here it is, you got these jokers that stormed the Capitol. You guys scattered like scared little mice and cowered. And then you suckers came out and voted for a lie that you knew was a lie, that you perpetuated because you thought you could raise some money off of it, and because you thought it would endear you to an insane leader. And now that you realize that these jokers are for real, now you're scared to speak against them because you fear for your life, and you should. That is a problem. Something happens when we send good people to Washington. The people of this district vote to send a congressional representative to Congress. We vote to send 2 senators to the Senate. And then they get there and can't vote their conscience as they know we need them to vote, because the parties get there and put the pressure on them. If you don't vote this way to support this on a national level, we're not going to support the bill that we know that your people need. And we call that all is fair in love and war and politics. It's something wrong with this system. And this is what Black people have been saying for a long time, especially during the summer of 2020. The system is jacked up. It ain't broken. It's working the way it was supposed to, but the way it was supposed to didn't include being beneficial to people who look like us. And in this country, even if you are a Caucasian, if you're poor, and especially if you're poor and uneducated, they don't care nothing about you either. We need leaders who are going to stand up. I was asked a question yesterday that I can't let go. The lady said, well, Mr. Armstrong, if you were there when Mr. Floyd was being mistreated by those police officers, what would you have done? I said, ma'am, I would have gotten Officer Chauvin off of him. She said, so you would have died. And I told her, ma'am, there's some things worth dying for. I'm not being critical of those people who were there who didn't do what I would have done. I don't know their story, don't know their background. We done turned to scared little punks. Some stuff is worth dying for. We're at that point. And I don't want to support no politician that's scared. You scared you need to leave. You'll sell your soul to get reelected? Are you serious? If it's that bad, just resign and move on. You're talented, you're educated, you got a big name. You can support your family. You don't have to be our elected official. You sell your soul to be reelected. That's a problem. Now I'm going to put my mute on. I'm going to let y'all chew on that for a minute before we get out of here.
That's politics as we know it. That's why we want to abolish the police. We need to abolish big government as well, and the way that we do things in this country. Because if you go to Capitol Hill, you're no longer fighting for the interests of your constituents at this point because of corporate money backing power, and as Mickey said, money, and more money. So you forget very quickly what the job is that you came. And I don't want to put that as a blanket statement for every single politician, but what I want to say is the system of politics it's always been dirty, but it's mucky at this point when you have a Republican Party that is inside their party trying to get a white nationalist caucus inside their party for Anglo-Saxon Americans. So politics and integrating and playing politics on that level when it comes to Capitol Hill, that definitely needs to be something that we should, as citizens, be fighting back against, and it needs to be changed. You need to take money out of it. Why are we as citizens can't fight up against a big corporation? We don't have the money. We don't have lobbying money for that. We're just citizens, which you're supposed to be, have our interests at heart, because we vote, we exercise our right to put you there. But now that you're there, you forget about us, and it becomes normal for us citizens, because 90% of Americans do not trust the government on either side. So there's no divide in that. But what divides us is the little 10% that they play against us year after year after year. It's the same talking points year after year, and Congress gets nothing done. So
and we go for it. We go for it every election cycle.
Yeah, but we rally, and you see how many people came out, Black Americans came out to put Joe Biden in this seat. Now, if we take that same energy and challenge against the policies, against the government, against our local municipalities, as far as the policies of what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, then we'll start eating away. But we're voting, and we should be, to exercise our right. But really, honestly, if we got to put it in the hands of Congress, who we all know is not getting any work done. We all agree, white, black, and in the middle agree that the government is not worth 2 cents at this point. American government is down in the toilet at this point. We know who runs America, and it's corporations. It's not us. It's not the people. We, the people, been going for a long time.
You know, I hear Elisa's passion there, you know, and I try to be pragmatic, you know, and yes, the Matrix needs to be rebooted. You know, the Matrix needs to be undone and redone. You know, our politics, the government, you know, yeah, I get all of that. The reality is, you know, that's much easier, more easily said than done. Where do we start? Where do we start? You know, where do we start? How can we start to achieve, you know, steps of progress, you know, notable progress? And that's my whole thing. Where do we start? You know, we see the problem. We see that the Matrix is a mess. The system is a mess. But where do we start? When will we come together, put a plan together, a collection of thinkers and people and groups of various races, cultures, etc., and put a plan together that we can begin to act on locally, that'll spread to neighboring communities, cities, states, you know, and to the point that we're actually making a change, right? But we have to start somewhere. And I guess my frustration is we see the big issue, but we're not starting. We're not starting with something we can see and we can touch, and so we can move the ball down the field, you know, one first down at a time, to use a sports analogy. We just want to win the game, but we won't stop and put a game plan together and start executing plays to advance the ball down the field. And that's what I hope at some point folks can come together and start doing. Put the game plan together, start executing plays to advance the ball, because things do need to be undone and redone, but it's not going to happen at once. It's going to take time and effort, and one success at a time.
And we just need to understand, Gary, to where do we start? We start economically. Okay, when you talking about local elections, then we need to, if we have someone that we are backing, then we need to do it as one block. We need to move as one, and we need to move as one economically when it comes to that person that we have vetted and that we are blocking. Money talks in this country, in Stafford County and anywhere else, and other things walk. So if we start together collectively, economically, and move forward with the people that we vet to put in, we can do it, and we could be an example.
Amen to that.
Yeah. Here's another thing too. Republicans are very smart in how they play their people. They bank on the fact, and I mean, it should be very obvious. They bank on the fact that they feel like their constituents are stupid, and they vote against their own interests. Democrats are bad too, but Republicans know that many of their followers are uneducated, poor white people who are voting against their own interests. But they play on that. As you said, they don't, if you're poor, you can be poor and white. They don't care about you, but they think they do. And so they follow that. You know, there's a whole segment in this country who neither party benefits, but those segments are so devoted to those parties that they won't come together and break ranks, you know, and they won't support. Like, I don't know if any of y'all saw Judas and the Black Messiah, where, you know, the part where Fred Hampton, you know, he went and he got the black folks, he got the poor white folks, he got all of those folks together who, and told them, look, we might not agree as people, you know, we don't agree, but we all agree that they don't care about any of us. And we need to get together and do that. And that is something that we just won't seem to do. And I can tell you, like, speaking as a millennial, we know straight up, millennial, middle class, we know straight up neither party is for us. The Republican Party the Democratic Party seems to be the lesser of two evils for many of us. But like myself and my demographic and the group of the early millennials that I represent and middle class educated and all of that, we don't fall for we don't really identify with either party. We would be right in the middle. If there was a party that was in the middle of them, that is where the vast majority of us would be. And we are the ones with the votes and the influence and the money. But we can't, there's not, there's a two-party system. So most of us end up falling over the black ones with the Democratic Party. But we know they don't mean us much better than the Republicans do. They just hide it better. So it's that thing, man. We need, when we have candidates that we feel like will actually make a difference, it's a joke. Like Joe Biden was not what we wanted, but we had to get rid of Trump, and we knew Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren weren't going to get elected. They had no chance, So what do? You go with the person that can get rid of Trump, even though he's not the right person for the job, but he's better than the alternative. And that is where a lot of it is. When you talk about getting rid of politicians and dismantling the system, like, it's a system built on a generation that does not want to. And Carl, I've said this on lives before. You know what I mean with you. It's a system built on a generation that does not want to go and retire. Like, there's places in Florida for you. Go chill out. Your time is over. It's done. That is the problem. It's all this old thinking. There is nothing an 80-year-old woman in Congress can do for me and vote in my interest. You don't know me. You don't know. I live on this thing right here. Like, I live on this. Everything, I can run my whole business and everything from this. You have to get assistance from somebody to figure out how to work your phone. You can't do nothing for me. And that is where a lot of us fall. So we get frustrated. Like, we know some of the things we can do, but we can't get in there because they block us out. So then what do you do with that? And by the time things start to change, the younger people who had all the ambition, they've become jaded, they've become locked out, they've become kicked out, and everything just keeps perpetuating. You know what I mean? So I don't know. That's my take.
Thank you. Heather, we don't want to leave you out, my friend. I know you're over there thinking.
No, I think I feel tonight how maybe Gary felt a little bit on Friday. Like, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it's just jacked. Like, it's just jacked. Let's all go, be immigrants to, I don't know, New Zealand or something. I don't know. It's discouraging. And the shootings that have happened in the last couple of days, it's just, all of it's just really discouraging. And, I agree. I think voting, and I always vote, and I vote locally, and I'm a part of that. And I think it's important, but I get discouraged too. I get discouraged when even it happened this last year. We're going to make this committee and we're going to make the blah, blah, blah. And it takes 5,000 years, and they put you off and they put you off and they put you off. And by that time, people are like, you know what? I'm going to do something in my own neighborhood. Like, forget it. I don't want to do this anymore. And it's not even because you don't want to stick around. It's because it feels like they're putting you off so that you will go away. Or if they put you off and you don't go away, so then they're like, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and let you do this committee, but we're going to completely change it from what we said it was going to be. And now it doesn't look anything like we originally planned, nor does it have any of the power or the influence like we originally planned. And so, part of me is like, then forget it. Like, we're going to stop doing it through the government side and just, make our own, not neighborhood watch, but Stafford County watch, and have, I don't know what it looks like, but we do have to start thinking outside of the box, because the wheels of government seem to turn really, really slow, unless it's something like what Mickey said, that's going to have to do with something that's, involved with money. And we're talking about the issues with minority people, and also marginalized people, and also other people who are impoverished. And that's not going to exactly, ignite the government to move real fast. So I don't know. I think we're going to have to really, I know some of us, and Gary, you've worked really hard, and Lisa, you worked really hard. I don't know you, Mickey, it seems like you have. I know Carl has, and you guys have all been working hard in the community, but it feels discouraging. It feels like, going through the government, even locally, it just doesn't feel effective. It just doesn't. So that was not eloquent, nor was it encouraging, but that's what's happening in my head right now. So
that's why we asked you to be on. We want to know what's in your head. I tell you, it's making me want to go do a research really on what it really means, we the people. Listen, y'all, we're going to begin to wrap. I do respect your time, and I thank you so much for coming on with me, but I know you got other things to do. So we're going to go in this order with closing comments. And please feel free to promote your social media status. And Gary, please take some time to talk about enough. We talk about getting things done through enough. Many things can be done that we're talking about. We're going to start with Elisa, then Mickey, then Gary, and then Heather for closing comments. Thank you.
I'm just gonna keep, staying prayerful, because we have no choice. We can't give up. We have to keep moving ahead. And what I have going on now is we're doing a campaign for Stafford Junction. Stafford Junction is a local organization that not only feeds the marginalized communities in our area, they also help with upward mobility and helping people to overcome poverty and to come out of poverty. So we are doing a campaign. You can see that on the link on my Facebook, which is Elisa Middleton, and on Instagram at ALI21992.
Thank you, Elisa. Mickey.
First, I just want to say thank you again, Carl, for having this platform. As always, it's always a pleasure to be on here. Anybody, you can find me on Instagram at MickeyLeon1906. I have a podcast, From the Minds of Black Men. I haven't recorded in a while, everything going on with me, but doing stuff like this, it definitely lets me know that I need to get back out there. The podcast is an opportunity for Black men to have discussions about stuff just like this. You know what I mean? So I will be recording, but that podcast, From the Minds of Black Men, you can find it on all podcast platforms. And I'm going to pick up here in the next week or so and record a few episodes, because I personally have a lot to say about this and everything. And Carl, you helped me remember why I started those things anyway. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. We appreciate you, brother. Gary.
All right. Hey, thanks, Carl, for what you do. You do it's just an amazing job. One thing that I want to challenge the panelists on, and every panelist that's listening that has been on here before, is we need to come together and put our heads together and get some sponsorship for Carl's Conversations, so that Carl can take this to the next level. He does a magnificent job at what he does, and he has the temperament and the wisdom to do this, where a lot of folks, me included, could never do it. So for those that are listening that have been here and appreciate what Carl does, let's come together and talk about the business owners that we know, what have you, around the nation, and see if we can get some sponsorship so that Carl's Conversations can go to the next level. I wanted to put that PSA out there. But I do thank you for coming. And as I was listening to everybody tonight, I kept thinking about Muhammad Ali when he said he shocked the world. I think it's time for us to come together and do one thing. I don't know what that one thing is, but that one thing that shocks the world. We all have local officials that need to be out of there. In Stafford, it's a lot easier to get folks out of their seat right now in the middle of their term than we realize. But I don't think we realize that. And we aren't serious enough about shaking up these elected officials to put our heads together to mobilize and get at least one of these folks out of their seat. That'll catch people's attention. So we need a shock the world event to show people that we're serious, that we're willing to mobilize, that we're willing to work together with the millennials and with the older people and those that have and those that don't have, because we care about our communities and our country, and we're willing to do what it takes to get the attention of those that can actually help us begin to make change, so our kids won't deal with 40 mass shootings in 30 days across the country. So those are my two calls to action. Let's get some sponsorships for Carl's Conversations, and let's talk about how we can create a shock the world event to make folks know that we're serious. And then we can start moving from that point one step at a time toward hopefully a future where we're, more pleased with the situation across our country. So thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Gary. Much appreciated. Ms. Heather.
I agree with that, Gary. That was a good thought. I know Carl's probably blushing right now, but I agree. There needs to be some good sponsorships, because I've said this to Carl numerous times and to people offline that he has the temperament and has a rhythm to be able to keep these conversations going, and asks good questions and knows how to bring it down when it gets a little heated. And I agree, I could not do that, nor would I want to. So I think it's necessary, and I think sponsorship sounds like a fantastic idea. As far as me personally, I feel a little bit like Mickey. I got started about a year ago, hot and heavy, and I have slowed way down because I just want to really hear what it is that I'm supposed to be doing and how to best use my voice as far as working against racism, and also dealing with issues of mental health and mental illness. So I haven't told anybody this publicly, but I did start a TikTok a month or so ago, and I've been growing it very slowly and quietly behind the scenes, talking about issues with mental health and also talking about issues with racism. If you look for my name, you'll find me on there if you're interested. That's kind of where I'm the most active right now, because Facebook was depressing me, and YouTube feels like too much of a commitment. So I am out here, and I'm still working and doing things behind the scenes, and would like to do more, but you can look for me and find me pretty easily. All my stuff is public. So thank you, Carl, for this time. I love talking with you guys.
Amen. Thank you all so much. I really do appreciate my panelists. I want to say this, we talked about let's do something. Well, listen, it's almost voting time again. And there are a few names I'm going to call out because I support these people. First and foremost, my Virginia State Delegate, Candy King. Her husband is part of our audience today, Brother Joshua King. He's also a law enforcement official. I appreciate Candy King for just a little time that she's been in office. If you listen to her, she has just been a magnificent presence for this particular district of the state, and I am going to be supporting her 100%. Also, even though I cannot vote for Joshua Cole because I don't live in his district, but I support him. I see the work that he does. So many things that my wife and I have done in the community. Delegate Cole has been there. He's been touchable. He's been honest. He's been active, and he has been for the people. And I absolutely love it. Also, Jennifer Carroll Ford, I want her to be the next governor of Virginia, and I support her wholeheartedly. Carl's Conversations officially supports these three candidates that I'm talking about. And I know there's some of you who are going to vote for other candidates. That's all right. That's your business. But Carl's Conversations, Carl Armstrong, and Tisha is standing right with me. My wife Tisha is standing with me. And not because I just said that. This stuff we talk about off camera, y'all. So you can't get me in trouble. But I'm going to be putting my vote behind these people. Listen, I want to tell y'all something. Mickey is my younger cousin. He's my first cousin. And I can't tell you how proud I am of him. I remember him being a little boy. His mama had to go sit with him in kindergarten because Mickey wasn't going to let her leave. And to go from that little screaming crybaby to being this responsible, very conscious young man. He's a family man. He's an educated man. He's a businessman. I appreciate him, and I want to do it publicly. I haven't even told him this, but as I'm sitting here looking, I could just imagine that the grandfather that him and I never met, Mr. Lafayette Alfonso Armstrong, would be very proud of what we're doing here, cuz. And I appreciate you, man. I sincerely do. Really, really do.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. My mom is watching right now, so, I definitely appreciate that.
Cassandra, you did good, sweetie. And I know you remember going to school with him, too. So, and I don't mean to belittle my other guest, Elisa Middleton. I'm surprised she hadn't been cutting up. She know what I'm talking about. She behaved herself tonight. My big brother, Gary Holland. I tell my wife, whenever Gary called, we look at each other and start laughing. I was like, well, I'm going to get me another job. Gary calling. So we appreciate Garrett, all he does, and we certainly appreciate Miss Heather Hutchison. And just thank all of you and my audience. You are great. You're great. I love you. I really appreciate you. Thanks for rocking with me. And remember, like I said, the first 3 people that contact me with your name and your mailing address, I will send you a free copy of Joshua King's book, the information about voting and the behind the scenes. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into running for office and all the information that's available that you don't think about, but he's made it so plain for us. And he has made it possible that I could give you these books for free. So we say shout out to Brother Joshua King. Thank you all. Let me make sure that I have covered everything here before I sign off. Look, Gary already gave me his information. so Gary gets a book. Amen. Amen. So we thank all of you so much for you being here. And Regina Leggett. So we got 2 people so far, Regina and Gary, they get a book. So the next person, who was going to be person number 3, you get a book. All right. So here we go. Thank you so much. Until next time, may God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. Good night.